Hello and welcome back. In the last section we started to look at charts and graphs which show comparisons and differences. And in this section we're going to continue on the same theme, and we're going to look at the ever popular pie chart. The pie chart is one of the most often used ways of demonstrating or presenting statistical information. It's actually an extremely good tool, but unfortunately it's quite often misused. In this section we're going to start by looking at the basic facilities for building and formatting pie charts in Excel 2010, and then we're going to look at its uses and abuses. Now I'm going to start with a very simple example of a pie chart. I'm going to use the data I used earlier concerning land use in a few African countries. I'm going to select the Congo and then select the 4 categories of land use, and then on the Insert tab, Insert Pie, and I'm going to choose the first of the pie chart types, which is a 2D pie. And there we have it. And in fact that particular very simple example tells you a lot about what a pie chart is used for. The primary use of a pie chart is to show how a particular amount, entity, quantity is divided up into categories. So we have a whole, which is the land area of the Congo, and it's divided into 4 parts. And the 4 parts in this example are labelled 1, 2, 3 and 4. There's a title at the top, and for each of the 4 categories we have a slice of the pie. So number 1, which in this case is forests and jungles, has the biggest slice of the pie. Number 2, cropland, smaller slice of the pie, and so on. When a pie chart is being drawn by Excel 2010, it always starts with the first quantity at the top at 12 o'clock and then proceeds clockwise around in the sequence in which those quantities are presented. Now we're going to look at the formatting of this pie chart in a couple of minutes time, but first of all let's just go back. I'm going to undo this chart actually, and I'm going to create it again, but this time I'm going to include the header row from my sheet. So I've now got Congo again, the 4 categories but the header row. And again, if I do Insert Pie and just choose the 2D pie, see what happens. And of course Excel 2010 now knows what those 4 categories are, and you can see according to the color scheme, according to the sequence that the categories are presented in the spreadsheet, you can see how they go round the pie itself. So let's now look at some of the other options for pie charts. If I go to Change Chart Type, and in the gallery look at the different sorts of pie, there are actually 6 here. We've chosen the straightforward 2D pie. Let's try the pie in 3D next. Basically presents the same information, but you can probably just about see that it's slightly rotated into 3D, and we're going to look at obviously increasing that rotation a little bit later on. Go back to Change Chart Type again, and now we come to one which is Pie of Pie. Now Pie of Pie we're going to look at a little bit later on, but here's a very simple example of how that works. Basically what Excel 2010 does is to take a part of the pie, normally the one with the smallest categories in it, the smallest sized categories in it, and explodes that into another pie, showing how the smaller categories are divided. And as we'll see later, that's particularly useful when we have a large number of categories. And if I go to Change Chart Type yet again, there is a final category here which is Bar of Pie. Let me just choose that, which works on pretty much the same principle, but this time the smaller slice of pie is expanded into a bar. as I say, we'll come back to those later on. So finally, let's look at two other options here. One of them is the exploded pie. And what happens here is that some of the slices are actually taken away from the main pie. Show this, what's called this explosion here. You can actually do this manually from a complete pie anyway, but this is sometimes a useful option if you want a quick way of showing this explosion effect. And again, I'll come back to the uses for that a little bit later on. And then very last one we have is the 3D exploded pie, which looks like that. And again, you can just about see the 3D effect on that. So these are the types of pie chart that we have available to us in Excel 2010. So I've reverted to the 2D pie chart, and under Chart Tools on the Design tab as usual, I'm going to look at the available layouts. Now with a pie chart there are no axes, so all of the labelling we use has to be chosen carefully, and where there is some sense in which there are quantities, we need to be careful about how we show those quantities. Now if you look at this example, this 2D example here, you can see that although we can see the relative sizes of these four categories, forests and jungles, cropland and so on, there's no information about the actual numbers on the chart itself. Obviously we can go back and look at the spreadsheet, but there's nothing on the chart. Now if you look at the available layouts, and there are actually 7 of them, you can see that, for instance, number 7, if I select that, I have no title, I still have a legend, and I still have my chart. If I choose number 1, I have a chart but no legend. But with number 1, I also get the labels pointing directly at the slices of the pie, and with each label, with the category name, I get a percentage. So I've got both the nature of the land use and the percentages. Number 2 gives me the percentages, the categories along the top, and I still have my title. Now obviously you can experiment with these and see the one which suits your particular situation, but it's quite important to recognize whether you actually need to show those values or not, and whether you need to show the actual labels pointing at the slices or using the color key system. And then finally, if I choose layout 4, I actually get the numbers on it. And there may be some situations where, as in this case, you actually want to show the numbers. Now if that were the case, I think you'd need here also a title or something to explain what these numbers mean, because 1829174.1 could be just about anything, and you need to point out somewhere that this is the area used for that purpose, forests and jungles, in square kilometers. So there we are. I have my chosen type for the pie chart. I've got the layout I want, and now I'm going to look at the styles. Of course I have all of the usual selection of styles available to me, and I can choose from the available ones, including for instance that one. And once I've chosen the style that I like, obviously I can bear in mind things like fitting in with themes from other documents and so on. So I've now selected my style, and I'm going to move on to layout. So click the layout tab, and you can see that some of the options that are normally there, such as those related to axes and grid lines, are greyed out. Of course there are no axes or grid lines with a pie chart, and we don't have things like a chart wall and a chart floor in this type of chart either. So chart title we can certainly change. We could remove it, we could put it overlaying and so on. And of course, just to change the words, I click in there as usual, and I can directly type in a better title. And for legend, we currently have no legend. It's turned off. I could switch it on. I could, for instance, put the legend on the right. Probably unnecessary in this case because I've already got good category labels on my pie chart already. So I'm going to switch that off again. And what we're going to look at next are data labels. Now, if I click on data labels, I have a number of options here. Straightforward ones first. We have, for instance, here an option for inside end for data labels. Let's just see what that does. If we do inside end, what it actually does, as far as it can, is to put the labels inside the slices of the pie. Now, if you take the example of meadows and pastures here, the text of that label is just a little bit too big to fit in there anyway without making the text very small. So it does as good a job as it can, but that won't necessarily mean that it will completely fit inside, whereas of course with other and forests and jungles it can. Outside end means that the labels are completely outside, which is pretty much what we had before. But in fact there is a good level of control over all of the labeling of a pie chart, and we do that by using the more data label options there, bringing up format data labels dialog. Now, in order to show the effect of the options in the format data labels dialog, I pulled the dialog over to the side here. You can only see part of the pie chart, but it will be enough. And basically the label options choice here, the page here, the very top one, has got three sections. The top section determines what's actually in each label. The second one determines position, and the third one defines a separator, and I'll explain what that means in just a moment. So the contents, first of all, you have a number of checkboxes here, and the ones that are checked are category name, so for instance meadows and pastures, percentage, which gives the percentage, and show leader lines. Now let me explain show leader lines first. If you move a label around, so for instance if I were to grab this label, particular other label here, and move it, the leader line is the little line that it leads pointing from the label to the slice of the pie. And I, generally speaking, always leave leader lines on, because if I later move or need to move one of these labels to make some space, the leader line is very useful. If you don't need to move it, then as here you don't actually see the leader lines anyway, so they're not really causing you a problem. So we have category name, percentage, and leader lines specified. If I uncheck percentage, note the percentage has now gone, and check value, I get the actual values in there. Now this is the point at which I can use a different separator. If I want to separate the category name and the value, I can choose a separator here, say semicolon, and as you can see I've now got the category name, semicolon, and then the land area. So I'm going to go back to putting percentage on. I can in fact have value and percentage. Note how they no overlap, and I'd need to do a little bit of moving around there to tidy my pie chart up. But if I switch off value again, everything should be okay. So finally, within the Format Data Labels dialog, I've moved the chart over so that you can see the whole of the chart. We just need to look at this middle section here, Label Position. The options we have are Center, where as far as possible Excel 2010 places each of the labels centrally within its slice of pie. Inside End, where basically it puts each label inside the end of the slice, so near the edge of the pie. Outside End, pretty much the same idea but outside, and then best fit, which is effectively the default, where it looks at the overall picture and tries to work out the best place to put each of the labels. So we've now seen all of the basic features of using pie charts. In the next section we're going to look at the special cases and some of the formatting options available to us to deal with more complex and challenging situations. So I'll see you then.